Welcome to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McLernan, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. Before we dive in, I want to let you know about two very important things. Number one, the stories shared here are often gritty, raw, and vulnerable, and very likely will include speaking about sensitive topics suited for a mature audience. Number two, this podcast is also broadcast live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So on whatever platform you follow myself or Freedom Nutrition Coaching, you have the opportunity to participate in this discussion during the live stream. And we encourage your participation both by commenting and asking questions. And so this podcast is about exploring the stories that take place between the before and after photos, not just in the realm of weight loss, but in all areas of life. So let's dive in. All right, welcome back to Between the Before and After. I am very excited to have a special guest on today. I mean, I think every guest is special, but Reggie's extra special. From the time that I first met him, I was like, I need to talk to this guy. There's something about him that just made me want to reach out and know more about his story. So welcome to the show, Reggie.
Hey, Jonathan, I'm grateful to be here, man. I always tell people you're one of my favorite people, man. Honor, and I am pleased to be here.
That's awesome. Well, Reggie, before we dive into your story, how about we let people know kind of where you're at right now and what you're doing? Because then we're going to share your story and show people how you got to this place.
Well, what I'm doing right now is I run a personal development academy. This academy is called right now 333. And what we get people from all over the world. And in 3 days, we help them understand why they're truly here, the beliefs that create an ecosystem for them of success, and how to break those ecosystems that may work in a negative way into a positive. I also run a student academy where I teach students from all over. I teach them how to coach. I teach them how to really address and break things that they're going through in their life. And I run personal development online schools. So that's a little bit about where I'm at.
That's going to keep you very busy. I'm sure there's a lot of demand for that. So, and I think your website is the ReggieMcKiver.com. Have I got that right?
Yeah. TheReggieMcKiver.com. You got that. Excellent. I love it.
All right, cool. And we'll make sure we put that link in the notes as well. So, whenever we see, and you're also a published author.
Published author.
Yeah. What's the title of your book again?
The Baggage That You Unpack.
Yeah, I was going to say The Suitcase You Carry, but I was like, no, that's not quite right. Yeah. So you end up writing a book about a baggage that you unpack. And what was kind of the premise of the book?
Well, this book really helps you get an understanding on how we make reality happen over and over again, and the power to kind of break that reality. That book, it talks about, the things that are happening to you. You get out of one relationship with one person, you get into another relationship. The person looks different, but they act the same way. Society will tell you to blame the people and say that you keep running into bad people. But what I teach you is that you're actually manifesting this person, and this person is not a relationship partner. They are a teacher. And you might, well, Reg, what do you mean by that? You bring this person into your life. I'm going to say, how do they make you feel? You might tell me that they make you feel rejected, unseen, unheard. I'm going to tell you to take those words and turn them into the opposite. You're going to see seen, heard. So the words that they are the opposite are the reason why they're in your life, to wake you up. When you wake up to the truth, these people would disappear. Not only these people, your reality. Jonathan, man, in doing this work, I've seen people in relationships where when they understand who they are, they get terminated. The person that they're with walks away from them because it was never their reality in the first place. And the book is surrounded by that person that aggravates you the most. Is the person that's designed to wake you up to your truths.
I think, what a brilliant perspective, just to take this idea that the things in life that make us uncomfortable, the people in life that make us uncomfortable, if we could view them as a teacher. And I think maybe we could say that we get annoyed or frustrated because a part of us doesn't really want to do the hard work, the uncomfortable work. But when we take on this perspective that this person is in my life as a teacher rather than an annoyance, that opens the door to personal growth and transformation.
Yeah, man, it does, man. And the trippy part is that you find out that this person that you have in your life that brought up these words was also in your parents' life. And then you begin to understand that life is more than just your struggle. You're
Mm.
fighting the struggle for everyone that came before you. And you've got one teacher that you hate the most, that is the most important person in your life. And that when this person wakes you up, the entire ecosystem that you created begins to change.
You
So
know, what's fascinating is just recently I interviewed a lady speaking about transgenerational trauma.
uh-huh.
And what a
Yeah.
fascinating topic that is. And what's really interesting, and I think it makes sense. So we can look at trauma as affecting our epigenetics. So we have genetics, that's maybe our hardware, that's our the code that's written for our body. But epigenetics is like the software or the programming. And trauma and stress change which genes switch on and off. Now, the eggs that your mom carried in her ovaries that led to you becoming you were formed in her mother's or your grandmother's uterus.
Hmm.
And so the trauma, and I'm like, it's still a challenge to wrap my head around a little bit, but so the trauma or difficulties that our grandmothers went through led to the genetic development of the mother, which then leads to the genetics that we receive. And so
Hmm.
trauma almost like trauma skips a generation.
Hmm.
That's quite something for me, it was a very fascinating conversation to have and to think about it in that way.
Yeah, and I love it. And everybody, we focus on that trauma. My thing is, what about the success that's wired into you?
Mm,
Everything in you tells an entire story. And until the story is gotten out, you won't have forgiveness, you won't have compassion, and you won't have truth. I teach an equation that compassion leads to truth, that if you're going to solve some of this stuff, that what pursued your parents is pursuing you also, but there is a way to break it.
mm.
I don't mind the trauma. I mind if I can't solve the trauma to end it in what I'm going and what my family's going through. You
Mm.
see? And in this, you have teachers, you have outside influences that you pull into your life, whether it's a job, whether it's a person, it comes to you over and over again. But until you wake up, you're going to repeat a circular cycle. And what you
Yeah, yeah,
and the children watch you go through this cycle, they're observing it. We don't do
mm,
what we taught, we do what we observe. And as they
absolutely.
observe your response to being stressed, as they observe your response to being laid off, this response that you give is the only relevant teacher in that child. They don't
That's
listen. See?
yeah, that is a fascinating thought. And
Uh-huh.
in my own line of work, I speak a lot about compassionate awareness being the space where we create change. And I love that you speak about it as well, being extremely important. I think this compassion piece, the ability to observe with a desire to understand rather than to judge, creates the freedom to create transformation.
Jonathan, I love it. I love it, man. And the point where every time we tie ourselves to being a victim of a parent, when we become a victim, we lock in certain circumstances and we
Mm,
can't see anything but what ties us into the victim. But when you have compassion, compassion allows you to see what the parent went through that made them like they were. Once
mm,
the compassion element is broken, is there, then you begin to learn things about your parents that you never learned before.
yeah.
Victimhood ties you into a frozen moment in which you must communicate and see them in that way. That's the power of this work, is to break all of that, where you can sit down and have a conversation with your parents and learn that they are you.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we're going to dive into your story, but I'm already just loving this conversation. Just
You know how we do.
yeah, the desire to be a victim is strong in people, so I try to think to myself. I have this lens. I say that all behavior makes sense, and I don't necessarily mean that all behavior is good or helpful or beneficial. But if we understand what's happening, we can understand why that behavior is occurring. So the desire to be a victim, it alleviates the burden, or what feels like the burden of responsibility. I am now powerless. There's a force acting on me. Therefore, I'm not responsible for change. The power doesn't lie within me. I am powerless. We might not use that language, but that's the appeal of the victim mindset, is lifting the burden of responsibility, if that's how we view it.
Uh,
So it means that we don't have to change, because the primal part of our brain is very resistant to change. It's a primal safety and security mechanism that we have. And so, without realizing that that's what's taking place, the victim mindset also has an appeal to it, because there's a certain comfort that comes from, let's say, maybe receiving sympathy from people. Oh, poor you, it's so tough. I know you want to change and you're trying to change, but you just can't because you're a victim, and so on. And so it's easy in one sense to understand why people get stuck there. So how do we get somebody unstuck from wanting to be a victim if it's potentially even a desirable state of being?
They have to understand the entire circle. And then they have to understand too, as a victim, I only create what? A victim cannot create freedom. A victim can only create a person that has inconsistencies themselves. So when they begin to understand all of this, by me being a victim, it does what to my seed? It does what to the people in my life? So if I'm bothered by this, I'm going to try to protect other people from being bothered by this. But
Right.
in me trying to protect them, I'm actually allowing what I don't want to enter into their life by another source. So when they
Yeah.
begin to learn this, they begin to say, okay, this is the thing that made, this is the experience that you had of your parent, and it hurts me and it keeps me locked right there. Then you educate them. It's freezing you. And if it's freezing you, you were never here.
Right.
So in order for you to be here, you got to look past what they did to you. First, whatever they did to you, it is a sign to your purpose in life. And they said, well, it was something horrible that happened to me. This happened to me. But I said, you're still here.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you bared what happened to you. But do you ever realize how many people are not making it? Do you ever realize that we want to be speakers? We want to be powerful. We want to be this, but nobody wants to go through storms. The storm that you survive could be the hope of someone's tomorrow. So when you see this, you become empowered. You mean to tell me that there's a God, there's something that allowed me to go through dirt because it knew up under all the dirt that there's a king or a queen? I said, exactly. Now
Yeah.
I said, let's go back. Don't stop right there. Let's go back and get more understanding as to what the person went through that did this to you. And then they begin to see all of this stuff that they couldn't see before. And this is when the compassion element moved in. You can't have compassion, but unless you go back, when you get compassion, you find truth. And the truth is what sets you free. If
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
truth, there's only bondage. So if I'm in
Yeah.
the act of being victimized, there's no truth in this. So only thing I can pass along is another form of bondage. When
Yeah.
you find the root cause, when you find where it started, then you find freedom.
And what I think this is a remarkable point to really dive into your story, because I know these words of wisdom are not just from reading a book, but from lived experience. And you talk about going through storms. And so, if we rewind the clock a little bit, I think you shared with me, you grew up in South Carolina. And, were there any experiences from your childhood that in particular that kind of stick out to you that had an effect or shaped your behavior as you moved through childhood?
Well, Jonathan, you said this is one of those unscripted where we're going to talk about everything. And I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you some things about me that I'll tell very few people. My childhood was not the average childhood. From the time when I could remember, when I woke up at night and my fear was going to bed, my fear was being alone. When I went to
Mm.
bed, I would open up my eyes and there's something sitting on the edge of my bed. It could communicate with me. It could talk to me, but it didn't use the mouth. And it would tell me that I'm going with it tonight. I would end up out of body. I would watch abuse. I would watch people on drugs, on alcohol, and I never could understand it as a little boy. Then when I got back in my bed, I was tormented. And that tormented means that I woke up sometimes with cuts on me that no one could explain. I woke up with pin needles and all kinds of things that no one could explain. And this is the basics of what my childhood was like. So even until recently, if I went to bed and I slept in any other position except like this on my stomach, I would go to another dimension that they couldn't change, that they couldn't describe. If I lifted up my arms like this and lay back, and here's the crazy part, my little boy is 1 year old. Ever since he was 6 months old, if he saw me with my arm like this, he would come over and pull my arm down.
Wow.
No one could explain where I went. The only
Right.
thing that I understood is that it's going to take 20 to 30 minutes to wake me up out of it. And I'm in a place where I can see you, where I can hear you. I can't see you, I can sense you, I can hear you, but I don't know who I am. I don't know where I'm at. And you have to rebuild my memory. The craziest part of it is that if you were next to me, whatever's pursuing me in that realm comes out of that realm at you. And so this is what childhood was like. I was a cutter. I used to cut
Okay.
myself. I used to stab myself. Why? Because I was trying to let out a pain. And I always had a voice in my ear saying, you need to kill yourself. You need to end life. Life would be better if you're not here. Jonathan, through this, the craziest thing, I began to learn. I would look in the mirror because I hated myself. I hated myself.
Yeah.
But I noticed that what I said in the mirror, somebody else said at the end of the day, before the end of the day. They would say exactly what I said. And I know more people that are like that. But I learned from that. If people say what I say, then they're going to say what I say when it comes down to business and everything else. So it began to teach me that thought is everything. I didn't learn in a school. I never went to a personal development school. I never picked up a book and read it on personal development. Everything that I teach and everything that I do, I've learned through going through this hell. So
Yeah.
as you're going through my mom, she was sick. She was going through fibromyalgia before it was really a disease. So they said it was in her head. She was going through her own torment. Every night she would come and have to wake me up out of this reality. And she would go right back to bed. I would hear her get up. She would come down the hall again. She would shake me and try to wake me up. I cannot tell her. All I can say is help me, help me. You could communicate with me, but I can't get out of it. Some said, go ahead.
I mean, that's I want to say a crazy experience, but I mean, I think it's an incredible experience to go through, and extremely difficult. And you kind of leading into the question I had, like, what is it like for have you have siblings or had siblings? What is it like for others in your life to maybe even develop an awareness that these experiences are happening to you?
What I found out as I got older was one family member was going through it, but in a different way in another room. So whereas dark things would happen, they didn't talk about it as much. This whole thing, who can you talk to about it?
Yeah. What kind of response are you going to get, especially as a kid, when you say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing right now? You know?
Yeah. When I was in the 12th grade, I went to the doctor. He said, look, you got 8 ulcers forming on your stomach. And what's going on? What am I going to tell him? That's not be locked up in an insane asylum. So I said, worry about grades. And he says, come on, just study harder. But this is a place where you couldn't talk to anyone. Imagine, Jonathan, going out on a date or going out with a friend. You come back, you fall asleep. Something latches onto you in that reality. You wake up, they look at you and scream and take off running down the road, and it takes 2 or 3 days for them to understand who they are again. But notice the thing that I said twice is knowing who you are. Don't know who I am, and I don't know where I'm at. Jonathan, it took me 40-something years to figure this out. Recently figured this out.
Yeah.
I don't know where I am, and I don't know who I am. The foundation of my work is know thyself, knowing truly who you are. But in order for me to go to that reality, it depended on me not knowing who I am or walking in that authority.
Yeah. Just like an incredibly, I think of it as an incredibly disconcerting experience where it feels difficult to, you know, and I wonder if you were to look at people and go like, does anybody else feel like this or experience this? You know, am I the only one, and am I the crazy one because this is what I'm experiencing, and yet this is all very real to you?
Jonathan, I think we all experience it in life. I think we all go through life to an extent not knowing who we are and not knowing our authority. And I think that things are all around us to wake us up, but we keep repeating the same day over and over again. Notice I was in a familiar place over and over and over again that I could not escape from. This whole thing became a metaphor for life. And what was my hell became the foundation of my teaching to help people be set free. It is what people go through. They go through the same place. They go through the same events over and over again, the same relationships over and over again until they settle. And when they settle, someone else coming behind them has picked it up. So I'll say I would cry, I would get mad. I would say, God, if there's a God, why would you let me go through this?
Right.
Now
Yeah.
I'm grateful because I had a chance to understand something that wasn't a teaching that came from a classroom.
Mm-mm.
And I had to piece it the day when it came to me. Reg, know who you are. Tell it to stop based off of who you are. It didn't happen again. Imagine your 6-month-old baby, and you know what I'm thinking about as a man. Please don't let what came from me come from my son. You remember Bruce Lee movie when something pursued him,
Mm-hmm.
and he had this fearful dream or this fear that came after him in this place that it took him. And then I said, I don't want this thing to go towards my child. This is when my child began to teach me. And we think so much that we're here to teach our children. But from the time a child comes out of the womb, they begin to teach us. We fight against it until we get them to conform.
Yeah.
My child wouldn't eat the natural diet that I was on. And this was, I was vegan, and I was giving him the little Beyond sausage, and he said, and give him this, and he, and I said, well, it put me on a journey, man. My dad had a massive heart attack when I was 13 years old, and he died. All of my life, I focused on not having a massive heart attack so much until I missed life. I was vegan. I didn't eat things. I didn't want to die at 42 years old. But that kept me locked into a certain reality. I was living my life wanting to make it past 42. But where was I absent from all this time that I was trying to go to what I thought was calling me? You see?
So you were going through this immensely difficult experience that, I mean, good luck trying to piece it together or understand it in that with at that stage of like your life, and then you lose your dad.
Yeah. And he was never. That's a story too, man. That's just because I was an outside child, so I was used to being a hush hush child or hidden. Now,
Okay.
that reality, you don't have a lot of people to talk to because you're not even supposed to be here. So imagine going to when you go to church, and you know how adults do, but they
Yeah.
call you a bastard, and they don't even know your situation because they're preaching and say, well, you don't even know who your father, you don't know this, and they're preaching at you, and everything isolates you. So
Yeah.
you have a life of inward hurt and being alone. And when you, and that's a dark place, brother.
Oh man, and I think like trying to form meaningful relationships and friendships, how incredibly difficult that must have been.
Yeah, had best friend, one best friend that I didn't tell him what I was going through until I was a senior in high school, and I kind of let it all out. And it was like there's no one can help you, no one can even to this day. They had some of the best criminal analysis. They had some of the best. They said this has got me. They said it's got me. A
Yeah.
person acupuncture. They said, well, I'm going to go into your heart meridian. I said, you can't do that. They take a needle and stick it in my arm, and then it shocks them back off of me like, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah.
And said, well, you're some kind of alien. I said, no, I'm just a teacher. I just understand to try to help people, man.
So you know, as you graduated high school, you decided to join. Was it after high school that you enlisted in the
Yeah.
Navy?
I wanted to get as far as away from as I could, you
Right.
know?
So this was like maybe subconsciously a decision to try to escape what you were experiencing. Hey, I'll get in the Navy, leave like everything about my situation, and just almost like start a new life.
Yeah. By that time, I went the Christian route. I was in church, um, doing everything I thought I could do, but it was still happening. I joined the military, 1991. And when I joined the military, the reason that I joined, I didn't care about war. I just wanted to get as far away from what I knew as possible. I tried to get them to send me to Bahrain, but they wouldn't do it. They said, we got to we're close to home because most people don't want to go that far. But wherever I tried to go, it always pursued me. Imagine being on a ship.
Yeah.
somebody on top of you, somebody below you, in a separate bunk, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Stacked
then,
up like sardines.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But imagine it happens to you in that setting. Imagine
Yeah.
that you go to bed, you're terrified, you're trying to get out of something. I wake up some nights when it happens, and my friend was standing by my bed crying because he said something was happening to you and I could not reach you. And imagine having a fear of this happening everywhere you go.
Mm.
It wasn't good.
Well, I wonder if they think that either you're having some kind of seizure, that you're, or even that you maybe have died, or like for someone to sort of witness these experiences you've been having, for someone to witness this taking place. Like I don't know how they would react, or they wouldn't even know how to react, because it's not a situation that we encounter. Like it seems like an incredibly unique situation that we don't encounter. So you think, what do I do in that situation? Did you ever explain to your rack mates, like a portion of like what went on? And you're like, hey man, if you see this happening,
What could I tell?
yeah,
I could tell them that I could hear them. I could hear them unfasten that belt at sea. I could hear
yeah,
them beside me. I could hear them calling me. I could tell what everyone was doing, but I could not come.
mm-hmm.
And where am I was the kicker. Where was I? All I know is that I'm in a dark place. All I know is I'm in a place that's incredibly dark, but I had no memory. I had no memory of things I did. You would have to talk to me to tell me who I was. And when you're talking to me, I would answer. And you said, your name is Reggie. Do you? And I said, yeah, my name is Reggie. I could remember that, but I couldn't remember anything else. The only thing
Mm-hmm.
that got me is when it happened that she said, your son is here. And that broke me down.
Yeah,
And that, because he's watching me in a place I can't get out of. And that tore me up more than anything else. I have PTSD 4 times. I've been military. I've been a police officer 18 years, SWAT team. That tore me up more than anything in my life. And that's what made me fight. That's what made me say, no, this is not going to happen. But
right, yeah.
it wanted me to know something. Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking. So then after you leave the military, you get into the police, and what was sort of the thought behind that? Like you say, okay, like joining the Navy, I can't escape this, so I'll go into the police force.
Being a police officer was what I always wanted to do since I was a little boy. You would have
Okay.
asked me what to do, it was to be a policeman. When that opportunity came along, I jumped on it. I made rank quick. I ended up running a boot camp for troubled kids. And wherever I go, I always migrated. If I'm in a store talking, a little kid will walk up and hit me, or they'll walk up and punch me. Out of the blue, it happens now every day when I go out with my son. We go to the play zone. Next thing
Yeah.
you know, I 6, 7 kids around me playing with me. And I'm like, why? But in that police department, it was some of the best and some of the darkest times of my life. Um, the stories get trippy, man. When I tell you they get trippy, they do. But it was a time that was helping me. I was a pastor, I was a police
Mm-hmm.
officer, but it was a time of which I was really getting to know myself because I had no clue who I was. I was helping everybody else and didn't know who I was. Pastoring a church, helping lead people, but had no clue who I was. So that had its own stories.
I think what an interesting place to be. Trying. I think it's almost easier to, could we say, to shepherd other people than it is to like know and guide ourselves.
Yeah,
And so maybe there was an element of, you're filling in the gap here. Well, if I can't know and understand myself and what I'm doing, maybe at least I can help other people, and I might get something from that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I spent 9 years preaching to myself and didn't know it.
yeah,
I spent
yeah,
people and needed the messages that I was teaching.
yeah. Isn't that an interesting way to think about it? It's like we have to learn the lesson ourselves before we can really pass it on. And so, the messages that would come to you to preach and to share would be messages that you actually needed to hear first.
I think that's how it is most of the time.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I think that every time we coach until we learn, we're actually coaching ourselves. Our clients that we have around us is actually an attraction in waking us up. And you get off and you said, this client frustrated me. I say, how did they make you feel? They made me feel like this, and this. Oh, the same way your partner made you feel. They're all teachers. And I said, you're not a coach, you're a student. And when you realize that you're the student, everything's going to change. You see?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I think how much I've learned from my clients. You know, they bring things because they force us to think about things in a different way, or get presented with a problem that I haven't heard or seen before. And yeah, there's always growth that comes from that. You know, you mentioned that you had some pretty dark days, some pretty great days, but also some pretty dark days when you were serving the police force. And I think it was 18 years. Were you a police officer?
18 years. I ended that as a lieutenant. I walked away to really pursue my truth. I had 6 years. As a matter of fact, I would have retired, I think, last year. And I
Okay.
walked away from it, not because I hated it, I loved it, but I walked away because something greater was calling me. But dark days
Mm-hmm.
as a police officer, and you name it, you're in charge, you see things, you have to go home, you have to deal with those things. At that
Yeah.
time, I was a single father. I had my daughter, I was raising her, and PTSD, without even knowing that you could talk to someone else, is a beast. You know,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, because I think you know, in 30 years how far we've come, just with even with the discussion around PTSD. And you mentioned 4 times you had 4 experiences that led to you experiencing PTSD.
mm,
If you're comfortable sharing, what was the first incident that traumatized you in that way?
well, which incident would I tell you about? Um, in a accident, someone had died on top of me, and
Mm-hmm.
that when I went to bed at night, I saw that, um, and it really, it really got to me. Um, I would during that time I was playing Russian roulette and looking for a reason to exit or leave this world, because it was the fact that you've taken a life. It was the fact that they took their last breath, with you, and it was like it was a hard one to get over. Um, Other one thing came from things that I just saw, or witnessing, a child getting shot by the parent's weapon, or witnessing
Mm.
a man that murdered his daughters, and remembering one little kid had to be about 8 years old in a horrific crime scene. She lost her mother. She lost another family member. She looks at me and she says, "Sir, I want to cry, but I can't." Then she brings this little 4-year old wrapped up in a blanket and put her up there and tells me she's being strong for her. So you got to go home and you got to
Mm.
see this all over again, you know? So it's heartbreaking. And it's something
Yeah.
you'll never understand. Not you, but out in general, you never understand what a person has to go through who responds to this, not only responds to this, but is in charge. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you have to hold it together. You have to get others to hold it together, because everybody's looking to you for that leadership. And in all of my life, it was everybody's looking to me for that leadership when I
Yeah.
need a leader. You see? So
Yeah.
when you come home, you don't sleep. When you come home, at one time, I thought that someone was knocking at my door. Every time I would go and try to rest after it happened, I would hear a beat at the door. I would go look at the door, no one was there. It gets
Mm.
so trippy. But
Yeah.
a lot of people, they don't talk about these things, but
Yeah.
those are things that I had to carry every day, and that's just some of them,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I can only imagine after 18 years of police work, that you would see just scene after scene, and you know, to be a police officer, it's like you end up seeing like the worst elements of society, whether you want to or not, and to be able to do that and to not become bitter. You know, I think about sort of the stereotypical old cop who's basically seen everything and is just a bitter, twisted, cynical old person. It'd be hard not to be that person when you
Yeah,
see these atrocities and tragedies and horrific incidents, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you think like, why? How could this happen? You know, I mean, I'm now a father. You're a father multiple times over. You think, especially the stuff that involves children, like
yeah,
how just like rips your heart in pieces when you see it.
yeah. You gotta go on. You gotta get ready, because you got to do it again the next day. There's no unplugging. So your personal life suffers, your
Mm.
relationships suffer. because you have no outlet. At that time, emotion was considered weakness. It was
Yeah.
considered, okay, you have emotion, and what? You got to do this again tomorrow night. You got to do this again the next night. So it's kind of like, what choice do you have besides getting cynical? What choice do you have besides getting dark yourself? Because it's going to take that in order to deal with everything that you see. You see?
Right. You just got to bury those emotions and not feel them. And of course, they all got to come out at some point in time. That's
Yeah.
the part that
Yeah.
I think we understand a little bit better now. The only way to get unstuck from these emotions is to move through them. We keep burying them down, pushing them down. I mean, again, why do many first responders become alcoholics? Because it's the only, because you can't switch your brain off.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just so I'm going to use alcohol to force that to happen because
Yeah.
there isn't another way.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And it's like everything tells a story. I had to understand PTSD didn't start for me in law enforcement. PTSD started with me since I was a little boy.
Yeah.
The manifestation of events that we titled PTSD. And when I begin to look at most people, you got two people go to war. One walk away with PTSD, one walks away just fine. If we look further, the PTSD was there. The war was just the incident that happened based off of things that they already felt on the inside. They try to get you to let go of the war, but it wasn't the war. They deal with the war, but it wasn't the war. The thing was the eggshells that you had to walk on when dad came home from work. The eggshells that you had to walk on because you had to carry yourself a certain way. They never look at that. You look at the incident and say, we're going to treat that. And why can't we treat this without medication? Why can't we treat this and give them pills and pills and pills? Because most of the time we treat the wrong area of impact. You see?
Well, then that's even that's like a really fascinating way to think about it is that, yeah, we look at the most maybe prominent incident and we don't look at maybe the layers that are underneath that led to that becoming the most sort of prominent incident. So
Go ahead.
yeah, well, so I'm thinking like how do you dig yourself out of a dark place like that?
Man, it took God, but I would say this. It took me understanding who I was, not just part of the picture, but the whole picture, the entire picture. It's anytime you say I have PTSD, you are announcing the state of. Once you say the state of, it's just like, and I'm gonna say some crazy stuff that might conflict a lot of things people heard. It's just like saying I am. I am can become conflicted with what you believe on the inside. So if you say I am prosperous, but if you got a whole ecosystem built around you behind I'm not enough, when you start saying I am prosperous, it disrupts that and it starts causing you trouble. So when you I'm prosperous, and next thing you know, your faucet tears up, the door tears up, this tears up, and you say, well, that's a devil. Do you know how to tell us that's a devil attacking you? No, it's not a devil. It's a system that you already have working, going in overtime to prove that I am is wrong. So in getting over all these things, I couldn't get over it without understanding why it happened, for what purpose it happened. That even going through back as a little boy, this thing that sat on my bed that I said was so horrible, you think about it like this. Why was it horrible? Because it had eyes that was different from what I was used to. It had a shape to what I was used to, that I was used to seeing. It was different. But then I start looking at some things. When you start looking at descriptions of angels, a lot of them didn't look like men. A lot of them were shaped like eyes with light. They were shaped in all these. And I said, wait a minute. All of what I was seeing may not have been bad, but I may have been bringing bad to it.
Interesting way of thinking about that.
Jonathan, we have voices in our heads. And
we all do, yeah.
Yeah, these are things that I've learned. You have a voice in your head. You're running a program.
Yeah.
A voice comes to you and it says, you know, your program is coming to an end. You bring emotion to it. You start saying, oh no, what am I going to do? Oh no, what am I going to do? But this voice constantly comes to you and tells you different things. Well, you know, that this is about to be over. You know this is going to happen. And then we bring the emotion to it. I learned that from bringing the emotion to something that might not have been terrifying. So once you bring the emotion to it, you go on this tangent of things that you do. The voice is trying to help you. The voice will come to you. Nikolai tells other people have stated something told them how to do things. A lot of us can't get the how to do things because we're so busy being afraid of the voice. When the voice comes and it says your job is ending, everything else that you bring after that could cloud the true meaning of the voice.
Well, I think about like our desire for security and familiarity and a sense of stability, which very often keeps us stuck. And so we go, well, I want to hang on to this because I don't know how to believe that something better is out there for me.
See, it's called compromising. It's called settling because we don't have the tools to enhance what we believe. You get off at a place and you say, I am. You start, I am is the most powerful, the most dangerous word in the universe. You pitch a tent, but it's not pitching a tent, it's settling. Right. You start to settle with that person that's a teacher. And then when you start settling with them, you grow old. You learn, you say, well, we have our boundaries. I do this and he does this, and we have our boundaries no, you don't have boundaries, you have a comfort zone. And when you have zone, you are absent of greatness.
Yeah. And I think, the way that I would sort of frame like what you're describing there is when who we see ourselves to be doesn't line up with the words that we say. And we attempt to bridge that gap. If I say the words, I'll make the change. And it's almost like it's an attempt to avoid going through the hard experiences that are necessary to truly create the change.
Yeah. Everything. When you really look at this thing, you know you get me excited every time we talk. But if you look at this thing, the average person is trying to escape a belief. They're in business, but they're struggling. They're in life, but they're struggling. They're struggling because they're trying to work against what they already believe. They don't recognize, they don't identify what they believe. So they say, I'm going to go in coaching. I'm going to go and start doing this. But when they start doing it, it's a struggle. I said, listen, find out what you're struggling against. Most of the time, you're struggling against a belief that came from observation. You watch your parent lose wealth. You watch them go through depression. You watch some of them go through the Great Depression. You watch them take on mindsets. They told you money don't grow on trees. They showed you that times was going to be hard. You watch them lose stuff. You watch these things, and this is what you observe. What you observe has taught you. So when you start a business, you say, my business is going to be this, my business is going to be that. When you start that business, you're struggling, and you're struggling against what you observed.
So you think this is what my business is supposed to look like. So you kind of get this picture, but your sense of identity is still over here, that business is a struggle, money is a struggle, and I have to work 80-hour weeks in order to make this happen. And, it goes on in that direction. And we don't recognize that we are struggling against our sense of identity. And it's really, change has to start with a shift in who we see ourselves to be. It can't start, like you can't open a flower from the outside.
John, check this out. I love it. Check this out. Dad said money doesn't grow on trees.
Yeah.
Dad worked hard. He doesn't understand you because he says not hard work. It has to be hard. You never ask Dad, who did you see do this? Because we were so used to being affected by what they said. So we go to counseling based on what they said. We have to ask, what did they experience? Well, Dad begins to tell you, well, there was a Great Depression. And when this depression came, we had to do this, and it was hard, and it was this, and you start learning the words. Then you say, Dad, well, who was your family before the Great Depression? He says, well, we were prosperous. We had business. We had this. You start finding out all kind of information that you didn't know. Now you start finding out a truth that depression came because of a national hard times that hit. Now they're telling you these words. Money don't grow on trees. That's why I ask people, what are the words? What are the words that ring out with you? Well, if it ain't hard, it doesn't mean it. If it distance, I said those words are clues. Once you think about it, once he goes back and he sees that these words came from the depression, the truth is now in the scene.
Right.
And nothing breaks any of this but the truth. When the truth comes in, the observation changes. And when the observation changes, it puts all of this stuff up in the air. Now the real truth can come in. I ask a person, I said, what's the truth about you? Who are you? Well, I'm powerful. I'm beautiful. I'm bold. I'm a bad. You know how they do it.
Yeah, yeah.
I said, that's not true. I said, you want to know what the truth is about you? When you walk into a room, what do you bring into the room without even opening up your mouth? Right. Then they get quiet. I said, you ain't said a word. You just walked through the door. What did you bring into that room? I say, of course, you don't know. I said, of course. I said, go ask people. Then they come back with a list. John, here's the tricky part. On the list, it has a leader. On the list, it has a deliverer. On the list, it has all of these words. Then I play a trick on them. I said, the teacher in your life, the person who aggravates you the most, how do they make you feel? Like I'm not a leader. Like no one listens to me. I say reverse those words. I'm a leader. I'm this. I'm that. So I said, the teacher in your life, the person who aggravates you the most, brings up the words that are in your generation. When you reverse those words with polarity, you have the same words that strangers told you that you bring into a room. This is the truth about you. And until the truth about you shows up in the earth, you're going to keep getting false results.
So we have actually a question come in from someone who's watching on YouTube and asking, how do you explain a difficult situation? You know, a 4-year-old who has their pet die. How do you explain a difficult situation like that to a child?
I'm glad they asked. Tell them I'm glad they asked. The thing about children is this. Children come into the earth with the natural order of asking questions. The child says, why did my pet die? Do you have an answer? You turn around and you ask the child, what do you think happened? And you listen to the child's response, because a child has a way of exchanging knowledge with you. But if I have a way that I want the child to get over it, I'm going to miss the exchange. You say, well, what do you think happened to the puppy? Well, I think the puppy angel came and got him and took him to a better place. He said, that sounds like a good explanation to me. Children are curious. You never shun them from asking the questions. When they ask you a question, you put it right back on them. They will find their comfort, and they will become teachers to us, because you know what, Jonathan? We stopped asking questions. We stopped asking questions and we started saying things like, I'm broke, I'm this, I'm that. A child comes in with a natural order to them. They don't think like you. They don't eat like you. They don't do things like you, but we try to condition them instead of question them. You see? Yeah. Instead of up until 5 years old, you can ask a child, where did they come from? And they'll tell you a story that'll blow your mind. But what I would say is that we explain things based off of our experiences, but we have to allow them to have their own experience.
Man, when my kid turns like 3 or 4 and has some more communication tools, I want to ask him that question, where did you come from? And see what answer he comes up with. Have you had the opportunity to ask this to any kids that are under the age of 5?
One, you don't want to know. One said, I chose to come here with my parent. I was asked, where did I want to go and why did I want to go with them? And I said, because they need love the most.
Wow. That's quite remarkable. And you've got a young son yourself. I think very similar in age to my little boy. How old is your son currently?
He's 20 months.
20 months. So yeah, he's 4 months older than my little fella.
Yeah,
It's it's an incredibly fun age. So what's really fascinating is you now, with all of this that you've been through, all of the experiences that you have, you're incredibly uniquely positioned to be a father to this child in a way that maybe, you mentioned having, how many other children do you have? You got
two daughters.
two
And
daughters.
let
Yeah.
me tell you something. Without knowledge of self, I was raising like like I was raised, even though I didn't want to. But you would be surprised what you do and what you observe. Observation is the biggest teacher in the universe, but yet it's the least talked about. So my thing was all discipline, no love, because that's what I got. All else,
Right.
no love. I'm a police officer. You better go to school. You better not get in trouble. You better do this. You better do that. But I'm doing what I seen, thinking that I'm going to be better. I'm not going to do what my parent did, but you just did it in another way.
Mm.
And so when I go through things, as you know how it is, they say you get nicer when you have the older child. But here's what happened with me. What happened with me is that my heart had to open. Every organ holds the essence of who you are. Egyptian society and mummification, they threw away the brain because the brain was no good. The thing we focused so much on was no good. The heart, the kidneys, the liver, they store the emotion. Liver houses anger.
Mm.
So if you got an angry liver and it's full, you're gonna have road rage. You're gonna have other things. So in looking at the heart, my heart had a story that it had to get me to listen to.
Okay.
Jonathan, your organs are always trying to talk to you. You got to people now, they can't even sit in a room without crying. Why? Because all of the organ structure, it came in through the brain, it's going back to your brain, and they say the thoughts trouble me, so I surround myself with people.
Mm.
These things are trying to get out of you, and they need resolution. If there's no resolution, it's stored into the organ structure.
Yeah. Which
When
is
my, uh-huh.
which is a fascinating thing to think about, because we might ask the question, like, where do we store emotion in the body? And when someone's explaining something that they're experiencing, I try to say, if you close your eyes, can you picture where in your body you're feeling this? Does it have a color? Does it have a shape?
Uh-huh.
Where are you feeling and what are you feeling? Because we know that our emotions affect our physical health, the expression of our physical being.
Yeah. It wants, see, here's energy. You go and you watch your favorite movie. And I say, Jonathan, what's your favorite movie? You tell me. You go
Shawshank Redemption.
Morgan Freeman. You gonna tell you and see, you're gonna know the beginning, middle, and the end. Now I can say, Jonathan, what happened in the end, you're gonna tell me. With energy, if you don't give it a beginning, middle, and the end, it's stored in the organ structure. And it's always trying to get closure. So when it's coming to your mind, it's not to trouble you. It's trying to get you to give it a beginning, middle, and an assignment. If you don't give it that, it goes back into the organ structure until eventually it makes you sick. So you
Yeah.
have to sit down and listen to what's in the organ.
So suppressed emotions get trapped in the body and lead to physical illness.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do? We try to swallow something to make us
Mhm.
feel better, but turns into further suppression. You have meridians. This body is connected. This heart is connected to the kidneys. The kidneys hold fear. When you have these things in the organs, it controls what you eat. A fear-based person is going to eat sugar. They're going to eat things that convert the sugar in the body. A person with an angry liver is going to love fried chicken, mashed potato, macaroni. They're going to love the things that are heavy.
Mm.
And look at your plate and tell you what you suffer with energetic wise. But all of it is trying to get resolution so that you can move. If you've got an overabundance of emotion in the organs, you're stuck and you're causing the same things to happen in your life. Don't ever give people the power to control your outcome. You control the outcome. Your very thoughts control people's actions. And when you learn that, life gets so much better.
So that's a fascinating thought. What I see on your plate will indicate what you're experiencing energetically. Um, Now I'm like, what was on my plate last night? It was a pita. It was a chicken shawarma pita, and it was really delicious. So I'm trying to think, what would that express? But it is fascinating because even though I'm kind of aware, I'm fairly consciously and with awareness, there are still urges and impulses to eat certain things, and I don't necessarily answer those, but they still definitely show up. So for somebody who might be struggling with, emotional eating, which is really the realm that I do a lot of work in. People feeling a compulsion to eat certain foods, and logically, this food is, making me sick. It's slowly making me sick. It's not helping me at all, and yet I feel a compulsion to eat it. What might you express or share to somebody in that situation?
A negative energy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So when this energy is in the organ, its job is to kill, steal, and destroy. Fear's job is to show up when you get on stage. It is to make you afraid. Then you get out there and you do it and you say, I was afraid and I did it and I overcame my fear. I said, yeah, you overcame your fear, but what was your message? It stole your message because you were concentrating on getting over fear. Now you go sit down and eat. Before that, you're going to say, give me a soda, give me some cookies, just let me snack. So it's getting you everywhere. And the thing I would tell a person is let the fear tell its story. Close your eyes. Let it talk to you. Don't look at it as a victim. Look at it as you're observing. And when you observe these things, and when you deal with these things, the craving will go away. Alcohol is a creative disease. It comes to creative people. When they get blocked in their creativity, alcohol is there. All of these things tell a story. But if you don't listen to the story, you're just going to be counting carbs. You're just going to say, okay, I woke up craving this, craving this, craving that. No, you have to crave solving the issues in life that you've been running from and avoiding. When you do this, the appetite is going to fall into place.
So, I love this idea because I'd say that emotions are check engine lights. So, that little yellow light on your dashboard that comes on and says something needs your attention. It doesn't tell you exactly what it is, but it says something needs your attention here. And most people's response is equivalent to putting a piece of black electrical tape over that engine light and they say, I can't see it anymore. It's still shining under the surface.
Very, very good. Man, emotions are the most powerful thing in the universe. And what most people don't know, emotions must precede faith. When you see something that you want, you're supposed to feel as though you already have it. Emotions are to be controlled, not to control you. When the emotions are full, the experiences in life will keep repeating themselves. So if you have emotional anger, if you're going to always have somebody in your life making you angry. Emotions go with faith. When you can see it and when you can feel as though you already have it, you shall get it. But you can't get it if the emotion is always anger. Because the anger and faith, you shall always be satisfied. An angry person always draws circumstances to make them angry. But they never realize if they own their emotions, they could bring what they want in their life.
Thinking about that, just thinking someone who's angry all the time becomes their comfort zone. This is what I'm familiar with. And it's actually, I think anger masks fear. It's a protective emotion to cover up for fear.
Brother, you got it. Only two emotions, really. Love and fear.
Yeah.
You see? Only two. And you just tied it in.
Well, it's always a fascinating conversation with Reggie. It's been absolutely brilliant to catch up. If you were to bring, if you were to say to someone who's listening to this conversation, there's one nugget I would like you to take away from this conversation, what would that be?
I would say take the whole nugget, because you know why? If they were here today, they were meant to hear it. What I would tell you is don't rest until you have the tools to find out who you are, and don't settle for half a story. Inside of you is an ability to change everything that comes behind you, whether it's in a child or it's in a building. But don't rest. If you got things that you're still hurt by, understand those things and you will have a life that you never had before. Go on a journey to know yourself like you never known before. But in order to know, you got to do some forgiving, even with yourself. Right.
You got to do some hard work. So don't settle. I love that. If we were to condense down to 2 words, it's don't settle. There's more in you. Reggie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being part of the show today.
Hey, it was an honor, man. I'm blessed to be here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, or leave a review, because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become. And I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you, because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.
Anyone can come from any place of brokenness and destitution and build an amazing life.